Picture yourself gazing out at the ocean from Long Island, New York in 1987. The scene before you is perplexing. A massive barge carrying 6 million pounds of trash floating aimlessly on the water. What led to this bizarre sight? How did it end up there? The explanations are far more astounding than you might expect. Come along on an extraordinary adventure filled with widespread alarm, illicit connections and waste, as we explore some of the most unbelievable shipping disasters ever witnessed. The boat to nowhere. To understand the sheer madness of New York's infamous trash-filled Sea Lock boat, we need a bit of backstory. Each American produces around 1,600 pounds of trash annually, about the weight of a grizzly bear. You definitely wouldn't want that rotting in your home, but what does this have to do with boats? Hold on, I'm setting the scene. Back in the 1800s, New York City didn't have garbage collectors. People simply tossed their trash into the streets, leaving the city blanketed with decaying food, broken furniture, and even human waste. Disgusted by the filth, city officials eventually started collecting the garbage, placing it in landfills to be burned. Today, a vast network of 2,600 landfills manages solid waste across the US, a largely invisible industry where the trash truck comes and goes without much thought. Enter the bizarre tale of the Mobro 4000. In 1987, New York's landfills were overflowing. Budding entrepreneur Lowell Harrelson saw an opportunity to make a name for himself in the energy sector. Waste decomposition produces methane gas, which can be harnessed for energy. Harrelson aimed to secure a load of trash to fuel his energy plant, and New York had more than enough to spare. He proposed a plan: hire a barge to ship the garbage away for less money than the city would spend to send it to another state. Harrelson would get his trash, and the city would get a cheap cleanup. Everyone wins. Except this journey didn't go as planned. The Mobro 4000 embarked on a voyage that would become a legendary fiasco, symbolizing a national trash crisis and leading to unexpected twists and turns that no one could foresee. But before we dive deeper into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more captivating content, usually a lot less trashy than this. Now let's get back to the adventure. Here's where things get a little tricky. Back then, the entire New York garbage hauling industry was under the firm grip of the mafia. Holy cannoli, what did you wise guys want with everyone's trash? During the mid-20th century, cities began paying private companies to manage their trash, giving the mob a golden opportunity to get involved, exploit the system, and launder their dirty money while they picked up everyone else's dirty goods. Plus, it's much easier to dispose of evidence when your cousin is driving the garbage truck. Harrelson struck a deal with a Gambino crime family capo, Salvatore Avellino, for 6 million pounds of their finest trash. Once the deal was sealed, the plan was to load all the waste onto a large barge, the Mobro 4000, and charter a tugboat to pull it from Islip, New York, down to Morehead City, North Carolina, where the methane gas would be processed. Easy, right? Nah, not quite. On March 22, 1987, the barge set off with its 20-foot-high pile of trash, heading for North Carolina. Harrelson hoped they'd make the trip there and back by the weekend, ready for another shipment, but things didn't go as planned. 6 million pounds of trash isn't exactly a pleasant sight. The monstrous, repulsive eyesore trudged slowly along the coast, offending the senses of anyone nearby. People weren't used to seeing the disgusting underbelly of their own waste, and the "not in my backyard" sentiment quickly took hold. A vicious rumour began to spread that an onlooker had spotted a hospital bedpan among the garbage, used by patients to relieve themselves. The Environmental Protection Agency had recently released new regulations prohibiting the landfill of toxic waste, and many argued that mountains of trash bags full of human waste definitely counted as toxic. Despite the rumours being just that, rumours, the public was outraged. Whether it was the mafia's influence or the sheer revulsion at seeing their own filth, the court of public opinion was swayed by the lie. The Mobro 4000 was about to face an odyssey no one could have predicted. North Carolina officials blocked the barge's entry into the port, deeming the waste unfit for disposal. Suddenly, 6 million pounds of rotting trash was stranded offshore. The tugboat hovered just outside Morehead City while Harrelson and company scrambled to devise a backup plan. Local news network WV received a tip-off about the barge's location. A helicopter flyover confirmed the gruesome sight, and on April 1st, Action 5 News reporter Susan Brooke broke the story to a national audience. Viewers across the country were aghast, prompting North Carolina to expedite efforts to push the Mobro out of sight, out of mind. Initially, Harrelson had struck a deal with Florida to accept the trash, but by the time the barge arrived, a crowd of 10,000 protesters had gathered to block its entry. Forced to reroute, the barge set sail for Louisiana, only to be rejected there as well. Alabama said no, Mississippi too. Everywhere the boat went, people rallied to object. There were rumors the barge ventured off as far as Mexico and the Bahamas, but Harrelson denied any attempt to send the trash to another country. Nevertheless, Mexico mobilized its navy as a blockade. Cutting his losses, Harrelson ordered the boat back to New York, hoping to dock near Queens. Borough President Claire Schulman, however, issued a temporary restraining order to keep the trash at sea. And so it did. With each passing day, the trash decayed further, exacerbating the stench and appearance. Worst of all, Harrelson was losing the precious methane gas he was hoping to harness, costing him money by the day. The Mobro and its repulsive cargo lingered offshore near Brooklyn until July, a staggering 5 months after it initially set sail. Finally, after prolonged and painful negotiations, an agreement was reached to incinerate the trash in Brooklyn. The deed was done, and the 430 tons of ash produced from the incineration were then loaded into trucks and transported back to Islip. Wait, hold on. Do you mean to tell me that 3,000 tons of trash spent 5 months sailing up and down the East Coast, travelling more than 6,000 miles, only to end up right back where it started? Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. The thing is, there was nothing inherently wrong with the trash or what Harrelson was doing. In fact, he was trying to do something right. But the barge became a strange symbol of America's trash problem. We all produce it, but we want someone else to deal with the mess. The trash wasn't the problem. We were. Well, not necessarily us, the late 1980s versions of us. After the Mobro incident, nightly news broadcasts began running stories about America running out of landfill space, suggesting that giant piles of trash might become the new normal. But it wasn't true. The Environmental Protection Agency had recently changed landfill regulations, requiring them to line the bottom with plastic to prevent spillage from decomposing waste from contaminating water supplies. Many small-town dumps were out of compliance and could no longer legally accept trash, but that didn't mean landfill space was running out. Harrelson never publicly disclosed how much the Mobro disaster cost him, and who can blame him? The poor man had already endured enough embarrassment, but it wasn't all bad news. The fiasco sparked unprecedented public discussion about waste disposal, and the Mobro likely played a significant role in the surge in recycling rates throughout the late 1980s and beyond. Sure, Harrelson got egg on his face, but it did lead to something positive, right? Well, that's debatable. Fast forward to today, and 7 Mobros worth of garbage leaves New York every single day, almost 50 a week. So has anything really changed? Many of us are far more conscious about waste and its impact on the planet, but the steady stream of refuse we produce keeps growing. What do you think? Has our relationship with the trash we generate just become more invisible, or is there no problem at all? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, while I'm still pondering the Mobro, I've rounded up some other shipping disasters that are absolute horror shows. Want to take a look? Who am I kidding? Of course you do. Let's go. Triple threat. Sometimes when I get that bad feeling, I'll lie in bed thinking about all the mistakes I've made in life, like the time I puked at my prom date in senior high. Sorry, but for all my shortcomings, I've never made a mistake quite as emphatic as the MV Tricolor. This 620-foot vehicle carrier was travelling from Zeebrugge, Belgium to Southampton on December 14, 2002, transporting around 3,000 luxury automobiles, when it collided with another cargo ship, the Kariba. Supposedly, the crash was caused by an error involving a third ship, the MV Clary, which forced the 2 colliding ships to change course into each other. The Kariba wasn't damaged too badly and managed to make it back to port. I know what you're thinking, that looks pretty bad. But it's nothing compared to the Tricolor, which sank where it was struck and lay fully submerged in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Yikes. Now, crashing a 620-foot boat and losing $30 million worth of cars with it would have you feeling pretty silly. But do you know what would make you feel even sillier? Crashing into a ship that's already sunk. Twice. Yep, just 2 days after the crash, another cargo ship, the Nicola, sailed straight into the wreckage. The Nicola got stuck on top of the ship and had to wait for the tide to rise before it could free itself. Then, on January 1st, yet another ship, the Vicky, sailed into the MV Tricolor. The crew hadn't paid attention to the warnings by the French Navy and consequently also got stuck on top. Except the Vicky had 77,000 tons of highly flammable oil on board. Uh-oh. Miraculously, they managed to free themselves without a hitch and none of the oil spilled out. Phew, but it could have been a heck of a lot worse. As if that wasn't already a ridiculous enough scenario, on January 22nd, a salvage tugboat coming to aid the Tricolour accidentally hit a safety valve on the ship, causing a huge oil spill. Man, who did they put in charge of this? This is one of the most incompetent operations I've ever heard of. In just over a month, 3 ships had collided with it, and the boat that was meant to be helping just dumped oil everywhere. What a catastrophe. But you want to know how much this cost, right? Well, if $38 million in lost cargo wasn't bad enough, there was also the cost incurred from a 2-year salvage operation to remove the ship, the damage done to 3 other ships, cleaning up the oil spill, and the delays it caused to the shipping route too. The framework for this salvage operation was never made public. Let's face it, they were embarrassed enough already, so we don't know the exact figure. But considering everything, I wouldn't be surprised if this went deep into the hundreds of millions. Now I understand why my mom always says, look both ways before crossing a busy shipping lane. The catastrophic crash. So, the MV Tricolour got away with only a teensy tiny oil spill. But what about when oil spills go horribly wrong? That's when the Amoco Cadiz comes in. On March 16, 1978, while transporting over 58 million gallons of light crude oil from Saudi Arabia to Rotterdam, the ship ran into some issues near Portsel Rocks near Brittany, France. The weather was choppy, and a giant wave slammed into the ship's rudder, causing the helm to lose control completely. Now, you'd think being able to handle the ocean is one of the fundamental basics of a boat, and in most cases it is. However, American petroleum company Amoco, who owned the boat, had cheaped out on essential repairs. The threaded studs on the rudder had sheared away and were no longer suitable, so the Amoco Cadiz got battered. But that was only the start of their woes. 12 hours after the steering was ruined, the ship ran aground, causing water to rush into the engine room, completely flooding it. This violently ripped the hull in two, and millions of gallons of oil came pouring out. The sea was still rough, so containing the spill wasn't an option, and oil began to spread far and wide. Before long, more than 45 miles of French coastline was slathered with thick oil. Over 20,000 birds perished, and the local marine life was decimated. At the time, it was the largest oil spill ever recorded. Although tugging vessels responded quickly to the disaster, the poor weather conditions made it impossible to attach a tow line to the Cadiz. Because of this, the boat ripped in half, and each part began to drift in almost opposite directions. Goodness, it took 2 whole weeks for a decision to be made on what to do with the vessel, and in the end, something drastic was settled on. Seeing no other choice, the Navy was enlisted to destroy and sink the vessel by dropping depth charges onto it from helicopters. A whopping 4,200 pounds of explosives were detonated 26 feet below the surface, and the Amoco Cadiz sank just 15 minutes later. Man, what a mess. So how much did this cost? Well, discounting the irreversible damage done to local marine life and biodiversity, which is arguably priceless, a US federal judge ordered Amoco Oil Corporation to pay $85.2 million in fines, $45 million to cover the cost of the spill, and $39 million in interest for the damage caused. Ouch. But wait, because we're not even close to being done. According to estimates made in 1978, the Amoco Cadiz disaster was likely to have caused $250 million in damage to fisheries and tourist amenities alone. That's a cool $250 million. However, the French government later claimed the damage and cleanup operation cost far more, a mind-boggling $1.6 billion. Of this, Amoco agreed to pay just $230 million in 1992 for their negligent responsibility in causing this horrendous ordeal. Sounds like they got off light to me. What do you think? Should they have had to pay the full fine, or were they punished enough? Let me know in the comments. Flaming fortune. Want to know my favourite thing about being on the water? There's no way fire can get me. I'm safe on my little floaty island. Well, not totally safe. On the 21st of March in 2006, the MV Hyundai Fortune was sailing through the Gulf of Aden, 60 miles south of Yemen, when suddenly the crew was startled by the sound of a ferocious explosion below deck. Nobody knew where it had come from or what had caused it, but the subsequent flames began to spread throughout the stern of the ship at an alarming pace. Despite their best efforts to contain the fire, the 27 crew members were forced to abandon ship and were rescued by a Dutch frigate that was conveniently nearby. Just as well, the fire continued to tear through the ship and eventually found, you'll never guess, several containers of fireworks above deck. The blaze swiftly ignited them, and all hell broke loose. The ravaged ship continued to burn for several days, and the coursing flames destroyed the engine room, which flooded due to the damage. It all looked hopeless until firefighting tugboats arrived on March 23rd and managed to quell the inferno. Once the blaze was contained, the ship was towed to nearby Oman to evaluate the extent of the damage. Roughly 1/3 of the containers were destroyed by the blaze, and many more were lost overboard. What's more, after the engine had failed, power to the ship had gone down with it, so any refrigerated goods were also ruined, despite being untouched by the fire. For the cherry on top, roughly 1/10 of all the cargo was uninsured. Yikes. But what actually caused that mysterious initial explosion? A subsequent investigation revealed that an undeclared container holding petroleum-based cleaning fluids had been stowed by the engine room. The heat from the engine most likely warmed the fluid to a critical point, and then kaboom! Whoever was shipping it had failed to declare it, probably to avoid paying the additional handling fee for dangerous chemicals. Well, that little shortcut really backfired. The combined cost for the ship repairs and lost cargo was estimated at around $800 million. But the ship was repaired successfully and continued to work as a container carrier all the way up until 2018. Woohoo! I love a happy ending. Well, I'm sure their bank accounts weren't happy, but we take the little wins where we can. The ultimate misnomer. When I travel, I like to travel in comfort. I've got my pillow, my blankie and my sweatpants. The ones without the spaghetti-o stains in the crotch, don't ask. But if there's one comfort I'd avoid like the plague, it's the MOL comfort. At over 1,000 feet long, this container ship was an absolute whopper. On June 17, 2013, she was crossing the Indian Ocean from Singapore to Saudi Arabia when she got caught in bad weather around 200 miles off the coast of Yemen. Storms? Sure, she can handle it, you might think. Wrong. The storm was so strong that it smashed a large crack down the middle of the hull and tore the whole ship in half. Yikes. The crew justifiably got the heck out of there and abandoned ship. I mean, what were they supposed to do? Stick it back together? No chance. Luckily, they escaped unscathed, and all that could be done was contact a salvage crew to save what they could. By some miracle, the two 500-ton halves remained afloat and began drifting northeast. However, the good news didn't last long. By June 24th, tugboats had arrived on the scene to drag the bow to safety. But just 2 days later, water had crept inside the stern of the vessel. The very next day, the whole stern sank rapidly to a depth of 13,000 feet, carrying some 1,700 containers with it. Amazingly, none of the 1,500 tons of fuel on board the stern leaked, or everything would have been made exponentially worse. Fast forward to July 6th, and things went from bad to worse. A fire broke out in the rear of the bow section, and due to bad weather, the salvage crew was unable to keep the blaze under control. The fire raged on for 4 days, destroying most of the 2,400 containers on board. Frustratingly, the cause was never properly determined because the bow section also sank the very next evening. This time to 9,800 feet, taking the remaining cargo and an additional 1,750 tons of fuel with it. Goodness. The loss of all 4,293 containers on board is the largest number of containers lost in a single event to this day. So, as you can imagine, the whole ordeal cost a flipping bomb. Insurers had to cough up between $300 and $400 million in claims for lost cargo. On top of that, the operator of the ship, Mitsui OSK Lines, had insured the MOL Comfort's hull and machinery for a whopping $66 million. But that's just the start. You see, the MOL Comfort wasn't the only boat of this type. 6 sister vessels were out in use that were made at the same time to the same specifications. If actions weren't taken quickly, this could be a problem that spiraled even further out of control. Luckily, all 6 were called back and phased out while important upgrade work was done to strengthen the hull to ensure another disaster like this never happened again. However, more work means more money. Not just in the cost of the upgrades, but also the money lost from them being out of service. What a fiasco. The only positive is that nobody was hurt. I don't know about you, but after all this, I'm keeping my legs on solid ground for a bit. This water business is scary. On that note, that's enough shipwrecks for one day. I'm starting to get a sinking feeling. Which of these shipping disasters shocked you the most? Make sure to let me know down in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.